Okay, good afternoon, and welcome everyone to our very first virtual launch of the month. And today I have two very special guests with me, and we're going to be talking about the future of education post-coronavirus. As everybody know that the world has greatly been impacted by COVID-19, and everybody knows that the impact is going to last for a very long time, significantly changing the nature of education. And many experts have said that the exclusivity of face-to-face on-campus learning will no longer be the preferred method of teaching by many universities. So because of this, I'm very interested to explore about this idea further with our very two special guests today. So why don't we start by introducing our guests? Okay, so the first one is Dr. Phil Laplante from Penn State University. Phil is a professor of software and system engineering at Penn State, and he received his PhD from Stevens Institute of Technology and an MBA from University of Colorado. So Phil's research interest includes the IoT, Internet of Things, software testing, and also software quality and management. And Phil is a fellow of IEEE and SPIE, something that I have yet to explore what that is.
Image processing.
And good morning.
Good morning to
Our
you.
second guest, yes, is our very own Dean Varkki Pallathucheril from College of Architecture and Design here at AUS. Dean Varkki received his PhD in City and Regional Planning and a Master of City and Regional Planning from Ohio State University. And his teaching and research interests lie in the urban design and the use of information technology in urban planning and design. Okay, so we're going to start our conversation by talking about some of the challenges that we face. Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Phil, since you are our guest of honor. Given that you have many, many years of teaching online prior to the whole pandemic, so can you reflect on your experience when everybody else were forced to go online? Because the challenges that we face is obviously different than the challenges that people like you face because you have the experience. Would you please elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so thank you very much. Just one other context, if it's helpful. Norita knows this, but not all of you do. For the last, I guess 8 or 9 years, I've been teaching mostly online courses. My students are entirely graduate. So these are graduate students. So just keep that in mind, because obviously the needs of graduate students are very different from undergraduate students. And also my students are mostly working professionals who are taking courses in the evening after work, which again, keep that in mind because they have different motivational profiles, say, than some undergraduates. So when coronavirus hit and Penn State scrambled to figure out what to do with the shutdown and how to deliver courses, I guess it was for us just as the spring semester was ending. So they wrapped up these courses as best they could online, and they figured, well, we've got the summer to plan for the fall. For me, I literally celebrated, not the misery of everyone else, but the fact that I knew I could work online and had a lot of experience working online, had all my courses developed for online delivery already, and had improved them to a level that I was comfortable with. So for me, it was business as usual, believe it or not. But my colleagues, particularly those who had never delivered online courses before, many of them absolutely panicked, and with good reason. Many of them did not have courseware that was ready for delivery in an online format. Most of them had never taught an online course. They didn't even know the difference between synchronous and asynchronous online learning. Many of them, especially who were teaching courses that had a high level of interaction, personal interaction, really had trouble. For example, now my wife is also, I should mention, a professor of nursing at Widener University in Pennsylvania. And so they had tremendous difficulties dealing with clinical components for their classes. How can you do a clinical component when the hospitals were locked down? So the university tried to provide guidance, drawing on its own internal expertise on delivering online courses through what we call our World Campus. Narita knows this, but it's our online delivery unit for the university. But there was horror. It was a horror show. The university tried to do things to help faculty cope. Simple things like saying, you know what, your classroom evaluations won't be counted this year because, you know, I mean, parenthetically, we know your classes are going to be horrible, or they might be. They asked us to provide as much leniency with the students as possible to try to understand that students on their end were having trouble coping. You know, we had some students who told us, we only have one laptop in our entire household, and we have 3 children who now are going online with school. How are we going to fight over this laptop? And the last thing I'll say too, because I don't want to dominate this, I mean, there were also lots of these technological issues. Believe it or not, some faculty did not have high-speed internet in their homes, making it difficult to do any kind of synchronous learning. Many of the faculty did not have the technical proficiency to even know how to launch, say, a Zoom session, or had great difficulty. We used the Canvas learning management system. It's like Blackboard. We used to use Blackboard, in fact. And many of them had great difficulty even navigating the tool. And even now, 8 months later, I'm still hear of horror stories of faculty having difficulties. I'll leave it at that, but there's so much more I can talk about.
So let me just jump in and provide context from our end. So Phil, just so you understand how we are situated. Right? So yes, I think the situation is quite different from what you described, your engagement at Penn State. We're a small undergraduate institution, right? So we have less than 5,000 students, and our focus is on high quality undergraduate education, right? And that focus on quality allows us to get some of the best students in the region, and who pay a premium to come and join us, to be quite honest, right? So that describes us. And so when you look at the context within which we teach, there's a huge emphasis on teaching and teaching effectively. So that's a big thing. About our transition, I paint a slightly different picture. You may not believe, you probably believe this, but we went from teaching fully in person, to teaching fully online in 4 days. In March.
Wow, that's
in
fantastic.
4 days.
Wow,
right?
that's a case study.
Absolutely. But it came at a big cost, which are some of the downsides that I will explain a little bit. But our experience was different. My colleagues didn't panic, right? We went about this quite methodically, figuring out how do we make this jump. Literally 4 days. When you look back at it, and many of my colleagues are in the audience, it's just incredible. It's mind-boggling that we were able to do that, right? But I'll talk about some of the costs, right? I think this was accomplished on the backs of huge amounts of time invested by faculty, right? So I think, and I'll talk about this in greater detail. So the other context, so this is the university as a whole. Within the College of Architecture, Art and Design, so it's not just architecture, but we have art and design, interior design as well, right? So all of these have one thing in common, and that is it's about creative work, right?
Right.
And most of these classes, at least many, our core classes are based on the studio model.
Mm-hmm.
A studio model is where you have an interaction between, an intense interaction between the instructor and the student, one. And two, it's also a social learning environment. So students live there. They practically live in their classroom so the building opens at 7 a.m., it closes at midnight. It's occupied all the time, 7 days a week, right? And so that social learning is a big part of learning in the design disciplines. And I think it also applies to say, the performing arts at AUS, right? So it's that expert, expert novice or expert apprentice. It's like an apprenticeship almost. Right? And so you were talking about your wife teaching nursing, and struck my mind. That's a lot like what we go through, and that's a fundamental aspect of learning design that we can't get around that. So that's to provide context. So let me leave it at that, Norita. I hope.
Yeah, can I say something to that, Narita? I don't want
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
It's so interesting that you said that, Varkki, because so again, because my situation is so specialized, and I mentioned, our students are being part-time graduate, are already detached. But I sympathize with my colleagues at Happy Valley, who, yes, the studio model, it even exists for, say, a software engineering lab, right? So if I were a traditional software engineering faculty member at Happy Valley, I would have this software engineering lab, funded by grants. Maybe I have 2 or 3 or 4 PhD students, maybe a half a dozen or more master's students that are, we're hanging around, undergraduates doing projects in laboratories, just as you say, instead of studios, eating, living, sleeping there, maybe having to chase them out at night, go home, take a shower and get some rest because you're working too hard. So I don't know how they replicated that. They certainly did not do it in 4 days, as you all did, which is really, that is a case study. You ought to write that up and share that with the world, because, and again, I know a lot of that has to do with the uniqueness of your university and its very special purpose focus and the nature of the students and faculty, but still, it's not unique. There's other schools like that, and there's probably lessons to be learned from what you all did. It's really fantastic.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, definitely feel. I mean, one thing for sure is that we were able to do that, I guess, in 4 days because we have a very strong group of support people, and we have a very good, strong management team that really, I guess, take the whole pride of pushing everybody and encouraging and inspiring everybody to do our best.
Well, I think that's another point you make. I think that's very important, is to have the strong leadership and common focus. And I'll give you a tiny counter example. So not a few days ago, we had a long discussion about, with our online synchronous courses, a mandate came down from the university that said you cannot require students to turn their cameras on. And there's lots of reasons why they say this, privacy and et cetera, et cetera. Some of these students are probably, they didn't have a chance to take a shower because they just got home from work and so on. But some faculty were complaining, well, how do I have this authentic presence, is the term they use, with students when I can't see their faces? If I say something, I need to see if a student frowns or smiles to get that feedback, to kind of understand if I'm getting to them, if I'm connecting to them. And I mean, I agree. I think you need that feedback, but imagine the problems when the faculty of the university, because we have a strong, shared governance system, and the faculty said no, or the administration said yes, faculty said no, they pushed, and at the end of the day, I guess it was privacy laws that prevailed. Yes. Again, little things like that seem unimportant, but I think they're important. Personally, when I'm on Zoom meetings and I'm not participating, I turn off the camera, only because I don't want to get caught, scratching my head or picking my nose or something like that, or being distracted. But in fairness, that's not the same participation as being in the room together with those people. Yeah,
it's good to hear that, Phil, because we face the same issue as well with our student, and definitely, we're not allowed to force students to do that. Let me just transition a little bit to Varkki. So specifically because you said already that CAT in general is very special. It's very different. The approach that you guys take towards teaching and learning is totally different over there. So when we move online, I'm interested to know exactly how do you keep the uniqueness, authenticity of being CAT now that we are online? Can you elaborate a little bit on that, Varkki?
Yeah, I think the gap was bridged just by the sheer amount of time that faculty put into the interaction with students, right? So to just give people some context, CAD faculty are in studios 2 times as much as people who teach lecture courses, right?
Mhm.
For 9 credit hours, 18 hours they're in class. Now, so that's when you're teaching in person. What the move online has required into to maintain any level of engagement is faculty put in almost 2 times that outside. And I feel you're nodding your head. I taught last semester, and I know that I put in much more time than I would have if I was in person, right? And so when you're really short on time, that extra time you're asking of faculty, that's a backbreaker, right? That's a backbreaker.
Yeah, so that's, I think, one of the ironies of teaching online that some administrators, well, and some faculty didn't understand who had never taught online. You know, it actually takes more time.
Yes, for
Most of the
sure.
courses, yeah, it actually takes more time than in person. Now, I have to admit, most of the courses I teach are asynchronous. And there's a lot of reasons for it. My students are scattered all over the world and time zone differences and so forth. But what it has done though is, and my wife and I, we joke and then we cry at the same time. We are literally on our devices every waking hour. You know, I mean, I'm notorious. I have a reputation that I get back to students, you know, so within 2, 3, 4 hours, sometimes instantly when they have questions. And I can tell you, by the way, that's a best practice. I get high ratings because of that. However, the price I pay is I'm never away from the class. I've got my cell phone with me, you know, when I'm eating dinner, and if it beeps, I'm conditioned now, like Pavlov's dog, to look and see, is it something important? And if it's a student, I typically will respond. So that's the irony that people don't understand, is that it takes far more time to teach remotely. I want to put a question in the hopper to answer later, and for you guys there. Given that you're so successful, and I'm assuming the students have echoed, this is working, this is great, why ever go back to a physical presence?
Oh.
Talk about later, Phil.
Yeah, okay, that's what I say. Put it in the hopper and save it.
I'm not sure if Varkki is going to agree with that, given all the different challenges that you face over there.
Well, and you know, it's funny. We have instances of students. So at Penn State, they're locked down. So some of the students are on campus, but locked down on campus, taking virtual courses in their dorm rooms. Now you would say, so why are they doing that? I mean, they're not allowed to have parties. They're not allowed to congregate in groups. So what's the point? I mean, we're living in some kind of weird, you know, science fiction world where, you know, we're in an augmented reality where we're living in a simulation. In fact, I read an article somewhere that said we're in a 50-50 chance we're actually living in a simulation.
Yes, put it that way.
I'm sorry.
No, if I might quickly respond. I mean, there's always been this argument that technology is going to move us apart, right? But ultimately, we come back together for human contact, right?
Yeah.
And that's something. So again, it's a question of context, right? So graduate students who are looking to advance their careers, who are doing this outside of their work, it's a different context from when for our students, undergrad students who many of them just left high school. They're building those social connections that distinguish our university from maybe others here, you know. So I would argue that contact and it's almost physical contact. I think we've found that virtual systems don't adequately are not an adequate substitute for that physical interaction, you know, talking to somebody face to face or in a small group. We have a problem of mental health, I think, with some of our students in studio who miss the opportunity to talk in small groups, to at least once a day just engage with it. And
Sure.
we have had to counsel students, please plan on 1 hour a day or half an hour a day with a small group of people you know, and don't work in isolation. Don't isolate yourself. That is
Right.
a message we've been constantly giving our students whenever it comes up. And so these are one of the many reasons why I don't think a contactless university, at least for us, is sustainable in the long term, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting it's a good thing. I'm just kind of, my question was kind of a rhetorical one, but we hear this now from Penn State students and their parents and undergraduates saying, well, you know, we pay all this money for the dorm fees and the activity fees, et cetera, that can't occur. We can take virtual courses. So you've probably seen there's a lot of pressure on universities. Some of them have even cut tuition this semester. But I know that there are a lot of students and parents who, when this is all over, when coronavirus is over and we can all return to normal lives, I hope, they're going to say, well, why go back to the old ways? I mean, I can see that you can complete your degree at home and help out around the home and get a job part-time and, you know, et cetera. This is part of what's going to happen. I think, at least in the US, a lot of people are talking about the sustainability of this model. I don't think it's healthy. I think you need the traditional academy. You need those in-person laboratories, those studios, the action, even for some of those, oops, did I get lost there? Even for you know, certainly in nursing, certainly in performing arts, you have to be present. So for the sciences and engineering, you have to be present.
Definitely,
So
yes.
one of the comments in the chat is, you know, maybe the technology will evolve to address to allow such close thing. Maybe, but I don't see it in the next 5 years, or, you know, I shouldn't say that, because that's probably
No, I agree. I don't see the next 5 years, and then you can get into these, you know, philosophical and epistemological discussions about, well, if you're in some kind of simulation in which it's so rich that you can't tell whether you're in a simulation or actually, how do you know you're not in that now, right? How do you know that was the point of that article I mentioned about, you know, maybe we're living in a simulation. If it's so good, if it's so, you know, if it passes the Turing test, and it's so rich, then how would you know? So, sure, maybe if we can get it, that'd be great, but we won't be there in my lifetime, that's for sure, and maybe not in the next 3 lifetimes.
So one of the questions is, suppose we had been used to online classes and were forced to go in person, would we do it? Is one of the questions in the chat box. That's an interesting question. My answer is, once students and the faculty get the feeling of personal contact, in-person contact, then I think they would not. They would rather do that, if it were possible, than go back to online, I think. And look, I'm not talking of all disciplines, all courses, everything, right? It sounds like a very sweeping statement. It's very narrow.
No, I think I'll use the typical professor answer, it depends. I think some people will absolutely want to return to in-person teaching, and for those disciplines where it's required, they have to. I think there are some people who will now prefer this mechanism. I will confess to you that I hope to never teach an in-person class again, partly because I'm getting old, and my style of teaching, I mean, I jump around like an acrobat and I don't have that energy anymore. This is a good way for me to teach now that I'm older, but not. Some large percentage won't agree with me. I know lots of my colleagues dying to get back to the classroom. They miss the interaction. They miss the after class, you know, chatter, whatever that might be about job and life. And I do miss some of that, and you can't get that, you know, this way. But I think people will be asking this question over and over again. And you know, online learning has been around a long time. There's a large and growing number of online degrees of all kinds. It works for some, it works for others. Some students are not suited for online learning.
Yes.
And others are. So
Yeah.
it depends. That's the answer that works for every question.
Right. So
Yes, yes.
if I might give you another example. So my son is a freshman at Michigan State University this semester. He is studying from Sharjah. He cannot wait to get out of the house and go to East Lansing, Michigan, any place other than home. So
He likes
look,
it cold, right?
he doesn't mind, if it's the North Pole, he would rather go and study there. So.
What does that say? I used to have the joke about my student would come, Dr. Laplante, I'm sorry I missed your class yesterday. I had to have a root canal. And I was good to know you prefer to have a root canal than to actually come to my class.
Well, I guess part of learning is to be there with your colleague, and the environment is part of learning. And when we pay especially premium price for education, we want to be there. We want to be part of the experience. And for your son, Varkki, obviously he has been hearing about the amazing college life in the U.S. Obviously, he wants to be there to be part of the living of the freshmen over there. Yeah, so that's for sure.
And the same arguments have been made and can be made, and I don't study this really for the workplace, right? I mean, so many companies now in distributed virtual workplaces, with team members located all around the world, and they get, even before coronavirus, and the question becomes, is that do they have the same productivity, the same social, and I know. People get doctorates on these kind of things, and I haven't read the research in a long time. But you have to assume that, some people can make virtual marriages work, right? Where one person is in one part of the world and one in the other. You did it for a while, right? And then, but is that the same as being together? And some people can't stand being with each other, and they need to be apart. And so it depends.
Yes, for sure. So now I just want to transition a little bit the discussion to some of the work, the research work that you have done, and some of the heavy involvement field that you have done with IEEE and also NIST. Is there a way that this organization and the research have been doing so far in terms of making the whole experience of teaching online and learning online better for the student and for the faculty as well?
Yeah, so you're very kind. I think the kind of things I've done are not that profound. The work at NIST mostly, in general, revolves around securing the system, and of course, those are concerns that universities have with online and virtual learning, and authenticating the individual who's taking the test. Is it the person who they say they are? Securing the network. We've all heard about the Zoom vulnerabilities that were exposed very early during the coronavirus pandemic, and it was discovered that there was a Zoom vulnerability which would allow unauthorized persons to attack. So we work on those kind of things. The others work on bandwidth issues. Zoom crashed, for example, and other. And then the other kinds of things that I had done prior to coronavirus really involved best practices for online learning in software engineering. So very specialized to my discipline. How do you do, there's a paper that I wrote a few years ago on our Agile, it's actually called an Agile Software Studio course, Varkki. So it's slightly different. Yeah, so it's a studio in the sense that, you're trying to simulate a bunch of software engineers interacting together in a work environment, working on developing a significant piece of software. And there are certain practices in software engineering that require, pair programming, for example. I guess it could be done virtually, but it's really best done together. Or certain elements of designing and putting together an architecture. We have software architectures. It's funny how there are so many parallels in software and the fine arts. We talk about the experiences and the way that things are put together really do echo one another. So I've written courses or papers on my experiences putting together such courses and how they work and that sort of thing. But that, I guess, makes the point that for the faculty, I guess there are faculty on this call, right? I'm assuming. One size does not fit all, and you've learned this when your 4-day crash course, that every course that you have to put online or work online, there are very specialized problems that only you can solve as the subject matter expert. There are general issues that can be, that are templates, patterns to be applied, but every course is so different. And one other thing I would mention, and this is not something that I've done research on, actually my wife has, on what's called authentic presence. Now, it's a lot easier to achieve when you've got a camera and you can see the students and they can see you and they can get a sense of your personality, but also getting to the point before about the virtual environment, authentic presence is the term that you use how close can you get to the experience of actually being there, where you come away feeling like, you know what, I felt like I took a real course with a real professor and not a chat bot and not, some kind of automaton. I actually could kind of tell you, I know the professor's personality. I know a couple people in my class that I interacted with, and I like this one and I don't like that one, and so forth. That's an authentic presence. And I really haven't done work in that area, but there is some work available. And it's important. I think that for those who are faculty who want to ensure that, not that your scores are good, but that the students feel like they learned and that they got their money's worth value for the course, you have to establish an authentic presence. So those are some of the things that I've written about and talked about in various works. People can just Google, and there's I put out a lot of stuff. Some of it's even good.
Thank you, Phil. Varkki, do you want to add anything to that in terms of your area of work, in terms of using information technology together with design and planning?
Yeah, I must admit that my work in this area is very dated. So in the mid-90s at the University of Illinois, I was part of an experiment which was called, it was funded by an IBM entity, I think, called Scale, something Center for Asynchronous Learning Environments. And so I taught many experiments in using these technologies in teaching. But I think the lessons I learned then are still true. There are some benefits to it, but there are some real costs, and I'm not sure always that the benefits outweigh the costs. So I can talk about it in detail, but I'm not sure it's. I think we've gone way beyond that. My work in terms of where we are now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, agree with that. So I'm just looking at the time. So I just want to go back to the point that we talked about earlier, moving forward. Obviously, a lot of people, a lot of news articles has been written about we would never be the same when it comes to education. So the future is leaning more towards blended education. Okay, we both touched a little bit about that. So what exactly can we do to embrace the change and also to help people, to accept the fact that moving forward, we have to be able to do both in terms of teaching online and also teaching face-to-face?
Yeah. Varkki, you wanted to go first. I didn't mean to cut in there.
Go ahead.
So just taking from the Penn State experience, where again, we had already been online, and we do also have residential courses. To me, I would say we know there's going to be some fully online courses forever. There have been. There's going to be hopefully lots of in-person forever. There may be some blended courses forever, and then there will be programs that are fully online, fully in person, and also blended. And there's, we can go over the million reasons why that is and the kinds of people that. But the most important thing is setting the expectation. I can tell you that when a course is listed as a residential course at Penn State, and for whatever reason, the professor decides to deliver part of it in a blended fashion, a few students like that, but a lot don't. That's not what I was expecting. That was not what I was intending. Or conversely, if a class has been listed as a blended course, maybe they meet once a week in person, and then the rest of the time they meet somehow synchronously or asynchronously online. And then the professor comes in, and for whatever reason they are uncomfortable teaching the asynchronous and synchronous virtual component, and they say, nope, it's going to be a regular course, and we're going to meet twice a week. Oh my God, it creates havoc because you violated a contract. Wait a minute, I have to get babysitting for, or in case of an undergraduate, maybe, you know, I've got some other activity planned that during that time you can't. So it's going to happen. That will have all three modes of delivery for certain courses and certain programs. We just have to be very, very clear about setting the expectations. And of course, taking the best learning from this experience, the coronavirus and prior experiences, and incorporating best practices. So, I mean, that's kind of a cheap professor answer, but I think, you know, from a strategy standpoint, that's the answer. To get to tactical details, we'd have to now focus on a specific program or even a course.
Thank you, Phil. What about you, Varkki?
Yeah, actually, that's really useful, Phil, because we haven't had that experience, right? Where students are given choices and they choose, and there are implications for their choices for us. We are not in that situation. Nobody has a choice, literally, right?
Right.
You do it or you do it. I mean, there is no choice. But I think we see some elements of that. So there is a large lecture course that we teach in College of Architecture. It's a course on film. Traditionally, students sat for 3 hours or 2 hours in the course and in the classroom and watched the film, followed by a discussion, right? So the faculty member, because of the situation we're in, did a smart thing. She said, you watch films outside of class. She even prepared a lecture, recorded lecture, so they asynchronously get that. You come into class, and class is just about talking about clearing any confusions and things like that, right? That would seem to me to be an excellent, efficient use of the time, right? It just makes sense. But the reaction from some students is, what? The professor only is there 45 minutes in the classroom just talking stuff, right?
Right.
It's not a real course, right? And so, yes, I think there are those expectations that you outlined that we have to that we will have to address. But I'm really would like to push against the idea that this is inevitable, because in the design disciplines, I know it cannot be inevitable, because the price on faculty and students is just too high. It's and it's not a real, well, it's a real price, but it's not dollars and cents or dirhams and fils, but it's a real price. But there's Norita, there's one other concern I have that I'd like to talk about. So the big issue was time spent, right? I think we have a big issue with academic integrity online. We don't know how to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
One of the approaches was, well, find assessment tools other than tests, right? Now, that may work in small seminar classes or even 30-student classes, or the kind of courses that Phil teaches, where people are remote, and we have a 230-student section course, right? There is no way you could reasonably or rigorously assess their learning without using a test.
Yeah.
And the current technology that we have is just not cutting it, in my view, and it's creating assumption that it's foolproof is just causing us so many headaches. So that's one. Second, second is in studio, right? When students are in the class, faculty are seeing their work progress. You can be reasonably sure the students are producing that work. But when it's remote, you lose that chance for ascertaining that who authors the work. Now, I've been as a critic in universities where they don't have a studio culture. Students work from home, and it's very hard to tell that the work was actually produced by the student. Right? And so one of the comments is, how do you assure academic integrity in face-to-face learning, right? I think it's easier when you have people in a room. I'm not saying it's foolproof, but it's much easier to assure academic integrity in face-to-face situations than you are in remote online things. So, I think that's one barrier from my point of view to the inevitability of contactless learning.
So you raised, I noted just in general, you raised a lot of interesting points, but three major ones that maybe I can offer some help with.
Sure.
You first talked about, you could never see programs that are studio learning based going fully online, and I think obviously I can't disagree with that. I would say that those programs, and I'm going to talk about more programs that have an expectation of providing a specific job role at the other end. If the job role is one in which you can expect to be working virtually or potentially working virtually, then you can have an effective program. So for example, software engineering. So many software engineers work virtually anyway. It's okay to be able to, it's likely to be able to expect a fully virtual online program that can prepare them to work that way. Someone who's working as a set designer, I have a cousin who's actually a professor of set design. My cousin's son is a professor of set design, I think is his title, at a university in the United States. There's no way you can do that remotely in the job role. So how could you possibly learn to do that at a university level? It's just impossible. Nursing is another example. You can learn all you want as a virtual nurse, but one day you're going to actually have to go bedside. And you can have robots and simulations, and they have them all you want. It's not the same thing. That's number one. You talked about a set. So not to black and white, but that's as black and white as I can get. If the outcome of that program leads to some job role where it's potentially virtual, then you could potentially have a virtual program for that. You talked about assessment. We've tried a bunch of different tools. There's one called Examity. I don't want to plug anything because it's a very expensive. I forget what it costs per student. And the students have to, they sit at their laptop to take the test. They have to flash an ID card. There's facial recognition that captures them. There's a monitor at the other end somewhere. I think it's based in India. So there's a human monitor watching probably more than one screen. And they're watching them as they're taking the test. It's periodically re-authenticating their face to make sure somebody hasn't swapped in. And if they see them grab a book, then they're not supposed to have a book, or they'll take a picture or they'll record that, and then that's a red flag issue, and then the faculty member can look at that later on. We've used that now for a couple of years, and I would say it's pretty good. I've actually had courses with and without it, and I haven't noticed a difference in the outcomes, at least the test scores, nor in the cheating. Typically, students don't cheat in my class; they're afraid of me. But maybe that's I'm kidding myself. So my wife they have large lecture courses, Varkki, like you have, with large numbers of students taking tests. Well, I've had her, okay, I got to go proctor an exam for a couple hours. So it would be her and 2 or 3 other professors looking at cameras while students are taking the test, and they're, looking for, the typical kind of things it would indicate cheating. And then the last thing I'll mention has to do with plagiarism, and that's something else I've worked in, not just software plagiarism. So in our case, some of the deliverables are programs that students write, and there are ways of detecting whether that's been copied, even if they've changed certain things, at least to trigger further investigation. And the same can be done for written text, right? There's plagiarism detectors. I'm sure you guys use Turnitin or any of those tools. And there's other tools that are similar. But how do you do that for a design? I don't know. I mean, or any sort of a performance art. How do you do that? I don't know. I don't know. There you have to rely on the expertise of the fact that, wait a second, I think I've heard that bit somewhere else. It sounds like it's been ripped off. But also, last thing I will say is I've been in faculty meetings with faculty from the Penn State College of Arts and Architecture who have said, no, but we have different standards. Don't you understand that plagiarism is a word that doesn't really apply in the arts sometimes? Copying someone's style it can be considered good, right? I mean, if you're producing works, it's not a Picasso, but it looks Picasso-like, could be a good thing. At least that's as I understood what they had to say, that mimicking someone is a form of you're modeling your style after that person, and that's a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing. But that's above my pay grade.
Right. So to just quickly respond to that, the problem is not being influenced by other designers. The problem is having other people do your work for you. Right?
How do you know that? Yeah, and there's no way. But
unless the student
the counter argument
is,
yeah, unless you're actually, look, if you're watching the person do the work and you can see it development, then there's no question. If they seriously appear with this work product and say, here it is, I did it, how do you know they did it?
Right.
You don't know.
That's exactly the thing. So, but just to go back to kind of our proctored online exams, we had a session, 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, Norita. I was told basically that there are Reddit, I haven't looked at it, but Reddit has multiple ways of cheating our system, which is respondents monitor, right? Has multiple ways. And students are sending their instructors saying, oh, well, these are the ways we could cheat on this thing. Look, now, there are sophisticated ways, I'm told, small speakers in your ears and cameras and things like that you might do in person, right? But by and large, to me, it's much easier to manage that in person than it is remote.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. We had this conversation again on Monday at our division meeting. There are sites websites, and I can't remember their names, but they're websites where students can go and they can retrieve old exams from certain courses. Yeah. It's old, when I was in the fraternity 35 years ago, 40 years ago, no, 45 years ago, we had filing cabinets with old exams that were, somehow acquired. And if the professors were reusing the exams, you had the answers. But the counter argument was, okay, how do you know which exam? I mean, if someone goes and studies 25 exams in electrical engineering and can remember all the answers, well, you know what? I'm okay with that. I think they've learned, then you get into the whole, formative versus summative assessing, the purpose of assessment. And, I think personally, this is where you get back to the authentic presence. If I can have conversations with that students offline and I get to know them and I can see, then I'm less reliant on the performance on one or two exams where, anybody can have a bad day, anybody can, do poorly. But these are the kinds of conversations that I know are going to be being had going forward forever, probably.
Yeah. I'm looking at the time, and we also have a few more questions.
People are bailing like crazy. Yeah, go for the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So before we wrap up, I'm just looking. Okay, so we have a few people who wants to ask questions. So maybe I'm just going to open it up for the people. Yes, the other field. We have another field here. If you want to come to the speaker and ask your question, Phil, please go ahead and do that, and then we go to May.
Sorry, I was just getting back to a point Phil made earlier about the three kinds of variations. So my only point in the comment was, but we have to act now, because if we go back to live classes, within a year, 7 billion of us learned how to operate in this environment. We'll have forgotten it, and you can't do it then. So we have opportunity, and it won't last long.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. This is the time now to you're building the courseware, and you're refining it and improving it, right? So again, that's another best practice for online learning, as with any, is continuous process improvement. So my online courses, some of them I've taught 15 or 20 times over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and they're constantly changing. And I'm throwing out stuff and adding things and refining them. And so yeah, don't throw out what you've got now unless it's not working.
Yep. Okay.
There were whizzing by on the chat bot, but it was too fast for me. I don't know, do those disappear or something, or?
No, we're good. Do you want to add anything, Varkki, before I ask me?
No, that's okay. Go ahead, please.
May, do you want to come to the mic?
Yes, sure. Hi. Thank you. This is a very interesting discussion. I was just curious to ask Phil, since you've had the experience of being both a student online and a teacher. What is your response to the argument that says that online education is inherently of a lesser quality than face-to-face? Because, I mean, you said you had an MBA fully online. You never even seen the university. So if someone comes and
Right.
says, oh, it's just an online MBA, you know, it's not as good as the other ones that are face-to-face. What's your
My answer would be prove it. Prove that it's not good. So, now you have to get into, okay, what are the outcomes that we're desiring for program A fully in person versus program A fully online? Now you have to then, get samples of students over a long period of time for program A online fully versus in person fully. And then, look and see if the outcomes haven't or haven't met. This is the problem that the template with, X is better than Y in academia is it's always idiosyncratic. It's always, what's the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And in order to really prove it, you have to construct these very rigorous outcomes-based models. And so it's easy to deflect, I guess, in that regard. I can only go based on gut in my case. What's the joke? What do you call a student who graduated last in his class from Harvard Medical School? Doctor.
If I might quickly jump in, I agree with Phil. I think the issue is we can't make sweeping generalizations, right? That an online degree is worth less, and I think it depends on what the degree is, what the area is, what level it is. Yeah, and the student, right? So I think there's too many variables in there to make. Now, a particular online program may not be as good as thing, right? It could be.
Yes, agree. Yes. Does anybody else have any more questions? If not, I just want to go back to both of you, Phil and Varkki. So if you want to give any concluding remark, especially moving forward, what should we do to prepare ourselves for? We never know what's going to happen, right? So any concluding remark from both of you?
Oh, I would just encourage people who maybe to keep experimenting and trying different things. I'm sorry, I noticed a bunch of questions were popping up on the
there
fly.
is a new question coming out, from Saket.
So,
So
I don't know if I can answer all them after the conversation. I invite folks, if they want to send me an email or something like that, I'd be happy to respond as best I can. It's here to stay. We know that. I don't know how pervasive it's going to be. I hope, and I don't expect that it will destroy the traditional academy. I mean, there's something about going and learning in person, forming those bonds with other people, creating, teams is irreplaceable. But things happen, and here's where we are. So that's all I'll say at this point.
thank you. And Varkki?
Yeah, no, I want to pick up on something that I think Phil wrote in the paper that you shared about contactless view. I think if it connects to the point that the other Phil made in the chat, which is if we hadn't had the pandemic, we wouldn't have done this experiment.
That's
There's
right.
no way we would have done it, right? And so, because universities are like super tankers, you can't turn on a dime.
Right.
The changes in direction are incremental.
Well, ours is like the Exxon Valdez, but anyway, yeah.
Right. So, but I think we must recognize that disruptions like this have both positive and negative. We never got to talk about some of the positive things, right? There are clearly benefits to it. But I would say, and so I don't think we can make sweeping generalizations. I think there are both positive and negative aspects to it. It is discipline specific. And so I think administrators, the public, everybody has to understand that you can't say just one thing and it applies to all parts of the academy.
Yes. I totally agree with that. I guess one of the best benefit is for people like us who are really, really pro into using technology to show that there is the benefit of going online. So this is the time. Can you imagine without this whole COVID thing? I mean, nobody would really willingly just to move their courses online. So yeah, this is a beauty in this for sure.
That's right.
So Yeah, so let me just go to one question here since we have 1 minute. So Saket is asking about, are we going to see a change in the way courses are designed in the future?
I would say yes, but it's going to depend on the university. I mean, I think it would be very hard to design a course that could easily be delivered in all three, blended online and in person. I think you're going, I mean, I know I have for certain courses, I have 5 different versions just for online, right? My project management course, there's a systems project management, there's a technical project management. I've delivered those in person, blended, and online format. And so I really have, 6 different courses when you talk about that. And there are 9 different courses, I guess. Some of them I duplicate, but so I don't think it's possible to have one size fits all modes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what about you, Varkki? What do you think in terms of CAD?
I think the experiment we've done will have an impact on how we teach in the future, right? There are elements that we will take from this, elements that have worked, we will take from this. I hope we are not forced to just take everything that we've done and continue it, because that would be a disaster.
Okay, thank you so much, because we're running out of time. So for whoever that wants to stay after this, you're more than welcome to do that. We can have our own personal chat later on. I just want to thank again both of you, Phil and Varkki, for being here. I mean, this is definitely going to be a very good starting point, especially for us AUS moving forward. So hopefully we can take some of these in order to design a more effective, more innovative way of teaching for our students in the future. So thank you everybody for being here. I'm going to
Thank
stop
you.
the recording.
It was nice meeting you. Great talking. Please write that up, man. I think